Good afternoon. My name is Don Keelan. I'm here at GNAT with my colleague of long time standing, Andy McKeever. Good morning. Good afternoon,
Good
Andrew.
afternoon.
Today we want to discuss what's going on in Washington. We haven't met since the election, I don't believe.
Last time I think we did the show was back in December.
Oh, December, so it was after the election. I stand corrected. But we want to discuss different points of view about what's going on, so we'll be on for a while, and we'll cover as much as we can. I'm sure Andrew has a particular point of view. I have a point of view, more of a historical one. And just to preface my comments, I am by no means an expert on what's going on in any of this. So I'm going to leave it at that and ask Andrew if you want to begin.
Well, no one's an expert, right?
That's correct.
I'm not an expert either. Well, I mean, I guess we wanted to talk a little bit about, as you say, what's been happening down in Washington D.C. over the past 2 or 3 months or whatever, and kind of our feelings about how that's been and where it might be going. I guess I find myself. Let's see, the word uncertainty has been bandied around a lot.
That's a good word.
That strikes me as being a good way to kind of have a one-word summary. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about where some of the policies of the new administration are going. And I guess I find myself wondering, what is the ultimate objective of some of them? It's a little hard to understand. For instance, you could look at the tariff situation. What are we trying to accomplish with putting 25% tariffs on Canadian goods or Mexican goods or China? The ostensible purpose is to encourage manufacturing to return to the U.S. I mean, it hasn't gone away completely, but is it the same as the 1950s? I guess not. But is a tariff supposed to do that? Maybe it does. In the short term, it also raises prices for a lot of goods. So I don't know. That's just one area. I mean, there are several others, of course. The activities of the DOGE project there, the Department of Governmental Efficiency. I kind of find myself very confused about where they're trying to go. And deportations, Ukraine. There's a lot of things to talk about, Don. But why don't I leave it there for there, right?
Well, you're right about the, and I certainly agree with you. There's a great deal amount of uncertainty. There's a great deal of chaos. There's a great deal of actual confusion going on, and it's in Washington. But just by example, you can say the same thing right here in Vermont at this moment in time. There's a great deal of uncertainty going on among the legislature, the administration, and many of our communities. What's going to happen to our schools? We don't know, and yet we've heard the governor say in his proposal that we want to close 119 districts and have only 5. The legislature say, one of the points in their proposal, any high school that has less than 600 kids has to close. That, needless to say, the uncertainty that brings to a community, and right on just before that, we had the hospital, the Vermont Care Board announced that the possibility of closing 4 hospitals, and UVM announcing that they're going to shut down dialysis and other things in certain parts of the state. A great deal of uncertainty is we're faced with. And now, of course, what's going on in Washington, but if you want to, just for a moment on the tariffs, I don't think anyone really likes tariffs. But if the statistics are correct, just using the EU and America for the moment, the EU assesses us something like $340 billion in tariffs on a whole host of products. We, in turn, assess them $54 billion in tariffs, 54, 55 billion. There's an imbalance there. And I think where it's all going to shake out because it's what the Trump administration has done is it's really blasted the whole area with the 10, 15, 25% tariffs, in some cases 200%. I think there's going to, in the next 90 days, there's going to be a settlement of it all, because they're not going to last. Tariffs really can't last that long, and it's so disruptive for everyone.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
but it needs to be changed. One of the points, what's going on, whether it's in Vermont or in Washington, it's transformative. That's what's happening.
Well, let's just back up a step and go back to your earlier point there about uncertainty in Vermont and schools and whatnot. I mean, I think there's the big difference between what's going on in Washington now and what may be being discussed in Montpelier and elsewhere around the state regarding schools or hospitals. The difference is that what's happening in Washington, it seems to me, is something that's being self-inflicted. That we're taking an economy that was functioning pretty well by most standards, pretty low unemployment. We had an inflation rate that was on a downward trend. Joe Biden handed off to Donald Trump a pretty well-functioning economy, and within 48 hours, all these proposals started coming out that I find myself wondering, why are we doing this? What are we trying to fix that isn't broken here? I think with the schools in Vermont, you have a situation where this has been a conversation that's been going on for, well, probably decades actually, but for a long time we've been aware that the school situation in Vermont is, kind of out of kilter. I mean, the financing mechanism isn't, might have worked well 20 or 25 years ago when it was first devised, but it's not really going to work now with a declining school population. So we're going through, I think, by comparison, a thoughtful process of thinking, what about if we did things this way, reduce the 119 school districts to 5 large ones? How would that work? And there's been dialogue and back and forth and comments, and people have said that sounds like a good idea, or they don't like it. It's obviously a very disruptive thing to take a school out of a small town, to close it down and have the kids go to a neighboring school that's in a larger community. I'm sure nobody likes that, but it's financially would make more sense. We can't go on the way we've been going, but at least it's being discussed in a rational, intelligent kind of way, and it's not something that's happening like out of the blue. And then in the case of tariffs, just to shift back to that real quick, then changed. I mean, we had a situation with the Canadians where we had tariffs on some goods one day, the car parts or whatever, and then the next day they were off. Would they go back on again? I guess, if I were a business person thinking about making a long-term investment, I'd be going, I'm keeping my money in the bank. I'm not going to put a building up or build a factory where I'm going to make a product, and by the time I get around to selling it, it's going to cost my customer more than what we thought. But okay, your turn.
One of the things we pride ourselves on this show, by the way, is that we don't want to speak over our each other or our guests, and that's why we.
That's what we call civil discussion.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
More
But getting back to your point, and I want to discuss the federal aspect of it in a minute. But here in Vermont, what's happening today has been leading up for a long time, and that is, we knew 30 years ago that we were in trouble when we started losing students. We knew that the school cost went from $1 billion to $2.5 billion, with 30,000 less students enrolled in the state. We knew the problem. What happened was last year we got hit with a lightning rod, and that was school budgets. Over a third of the school budgets in Vermont were turned down. And the new legislature, not a new legislature, but more Republicans came into the office than had ever before. As a matter of fact, Vermont had more Republicans gain in the legislature than any state in the country in this past election. What was said was, we need change. All right? Something's got to change, because we cannot kick the can down the road any longer. Right? Whether it's in education or in healthcare. Right? And we've been doing that. Let's face it, we've been doing that, and then everyone got a wake-up call. To change things, it's going to be it's going to be disruptive, it's going to be uncertainty, and it's going to be it's really going to be messy. Going back to your point about the federal government, yes, the Biden administration did turn over a fairly good economy in some aspects. But again, the can that's being kicked down the road here is the debt. Right? We're now, I believe the number is about $36 trillion, of which about maybe a fifth is owned by foreign countries and foreigners, right? $7 or $8 trillion. The interest on that debt, as of last week, the annual interest was roughly $1.1 trillion, right? Almost equal to the budget, the defense budget. I think, as a matter of fact, I think it's a bit more. And here's the point. Whether it's the Trump administration or other administrations, what are you going to do with this debt? Because at some point, foreigners may no longer want to buy it, right? And they're a big part of the purchasing of our debt. When the Treasury comes out, or the Federal Reserve comes out and announces a new sale of bonds, who buys the bonds, right? And if they're not willing to buy the bonds, right, at the current interest rates, they may say, look, you folks are really getting into be a junk bond status. We want a higher interest rate. It's bad enough as it is now. That needs to be addressed. One of the ways of addressing it, of course, is let's cut spending. The flip side, of course, is taxes. And then in the middle is creating a larger economy that we can get more taxes into the federal treasury. All right, but right now, without increasing taxes, this administration is saying, let's cut the federal budget. Let's go through and do something that other administrations have tried to do. Almost every one of them has said, we're going to shrink the size of government, only to fail really doing it, because it's enormous. And now, do I agree with Doge and the way they're going through it all? Not really. I think it's very chaotic. I think they're making mistakes. I think it's there could be a better way to do it. But what's happening is Trump, and by the way, as you know from our other shows, I am not a big personal supporter personally of Trump, but the programs that he announced during his election period are being carried out. What's happening, for the most part, the big program, it's not new. He announced this during his campaign. Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, I didn't hear about that during the campaign, or Greenland, or Panama Canal. But I don't want to get sucked into his trolling skills. But that to me, yeah, we have an economy with low unemployment, inflation appears to be coming under control, and so forth. But it's the debt. That's the elephant in the closet. Very much like Vermont. We can talk about Vermont. The elephant in the closet in Vermont is the pension plan. The billions of dollars we have in unfunded pension costs to our state employees. Right now, I think it's close to $4 or $5 billion. That's unfunded, meaning if everyone retired today, we don't have the funds in which to pay these people. Now, the legislature addressed this a few years ago by setting aside, I think, $250 million each year to try to get that unfunded portion down of it. But do the math. How long is that going to take? So again, that's the elephant in the closet here in Vermont, and the big elephant in the closet in Washington, or nationwide, is the debt.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure in a perfect world, the federal government would be, you know, running an even balance sheet. I'm sure that's what everyone would like, but, you know, politics comes into the picture pretty quickly here with this. I mean, you've, I'm sure, got a much better understanding of the federal debt than I do. It's not an area I've explored anywhere near as much as I should, but my understanding is that a large chunk of the federal budget, which drives the debt, are things like Social Security, Medicare, and defense spending. That's like, I think, I don't want to get into numbers here, but it's a big chunk, 40, 50% maybe, maybe more than that. You know, when you start talking about cutting any one of those three things, you run into a lot of roadblocks, whether or not it's a congressperson who has a military base in their district that is supposed to be closed, and they're going, what? Wait a minute, that's 500 jobs. We can't do that. You know, and Medicare and Social Security, same thing. You know, and I think basically those two programs perform very vital services, or you know, services that people in our age bracket rely upon, and without them would be in trouble. So it's, you know, going to be hard to cut anything there. Now, you know, it just seems like the debt is important, but when therefore, when you look at what Doge is trying to do, or Elon Musk and his group of young tech experts are trying to do, it's like it's just you know, they think, oh, we can save, like, you know, money here, money there. They, you know, they went ahead and decided to cut programs. Just seemed like, without any real analysis of what they were cutting, or were these going to, you know, were they things like USAID? They were performing some valuable services, but they just saw that they could cut, you know, 2,000 jobs here and 5,000 jobs there, and save a tiny fraction of what you would need to eliminate the debt. So to argue that those kinds of chaotic cuts, made willy-nilly without seeming a lot of forethought, aren't going to really solve the debt problem. We're still going to have a debt problem. Now, if we're looking at the other side of the coin, and you know, the tax situation, well, let me back up for a second and just say, you know, you made a great point there, I think, about, you know, other countries who buy our debt. A lot of them, I'm sure, are European countries, which we've now managed to make into not quite as close a relationship as we had a year ago, or even 3 or 4 months ago, with the rhetoric around the tariffs. I mean, it was just reckless and ridiculous to approach it that way. You know, I think you know, the way they're going about trying to do this, to me, is almost a bigger problem about what the cure is supposed to be. There's a way of analyzing a situation and seeing where you can make, you know, cuts. I'm sure every organization that's ever existed has had waste and inefficiency, whether it's a large, you know, small family business, or a school district, or the government, or, you know, General Electric or General Motors. I mean, I'm sure there's waste and inefficiency that can be found. Fine. I'm sure everybody would like to eliminate that from the bottom line. But there's a way to do it thoughtfully and carefully, so that you're not throwing people out of work, you know, out of the blue, and then hiring them back again because, oops, all of a sudden we need these people. It's crazy, I think, the way that they're going about it, and I, you know, and I find myself wondering, you know, okay, so let's say these tariffs bring in, I don't know, X billions of dollars from, now we're going to tax something from stuff from Canada and Mexico and the European Union. Is that going to be applied to the debt? I mean, and anyway, I mean, is there anything close to being enough? We're not talking, I don't think, trillions of dollars in new revenue that's going to come out of these tariffs. I could be wrong, but you know, it doesn't seem like that's going to be an ample enough solution. I mean, I think if we wanted to really get serious about it, you'd be looking at not renewing Trump's tax program from 2017, where the corporate tax rates got cut from 35 to 21%. I mean, if anything, you'd want to take it back up towards 35%. I mean, back in the glory days of the 1950s, when Dwight Eisenhower was president, the top personal tax rate, I think, was somewhere, in the 80 or 90% range. Was incredibly high. Those got reduced over the years, but I don't understand then why, why don't we look at, a tax program that doesn't talk about keeping taxes at a lower rate than what they used to be in the relatively recent past, and having that money then flow into tackling the deficit.
That's it?
Yeah, I'm done for the moment.
I want to cover several points that you made. One, let's be distinct when we talk about the debt. There's the debt that the government owes. That's the $36 trillion. That's fixed, right? And that's where the annual interest rate is about that we pay on that debt, about $1.1 trillion. That's the debt. Over here you have the deficit. And the deficit is where every year the government runs a budget and they exceed the amount of money that's coming in by $1 trillion. That's what's been happening in the last several years. Right? In other words, rather than have what we know from a local community or a state or even running our own house, the government was spending more money than it was taking in. The last time I believe that it was balanced, where the amount of money coming in was the exact amount of money that was being spent, and there was no need to go out and borrow the money to make up that deficit. Right? That was under President Clinton. Right? And every president
2000 or so,
huh?
2000 or so, last year.
In the 1990s, late 1990s, I believe. So I want to make the distinction. In order not to increase the debt, we have to make sure that we run the government every year on a balanced budget. Now you balance it by either cutting costs, not adding any more programs that you can't fund, or raising taxes. And the third way, of course, is, as I mentioned earlier, is to grow the economy so that we have a lot more companies paying into the pool. We have a lot more employees paying into the pool. That last point I made is very much what the government is trying to promote here in Vermont. We need more people paying taxes. We don't need to increase the taxes. We need more people to pay taxes. And that means we need more families coming in here to work so they can be available to grow our economy, but at the same time pay more taxes. Right? That's exactly what's going on we need in Washington. Now the Trump administration, as other administrations are saying, and Trump going through it with Doge, is saying we have to cut federal programs. Right? Now, as I prefaced earlier, do I agree with the way in which they're going about cutting a lot of these programs? No, it's not the way I would have done it, but who am I? Right? But they're saying, look, so many administrations have tried this, and it didn't work. We're going to try a whole new approach. And that's just coming out and with what Musk is doing, and these other agencies. And it appears like, if you believe the statistic, I'm not going to believe it till I see it, is that they're looking at a little over $1 trillion in savings. I'd like to see that. Right? How those numbers are derived at. Right? Getting back to your other point about the Eisenhower administration, yes, taxes were very high. There was from the various wars we were involved in. But when President Kennedy took over, he recognized that we had to drop the tax rate, and they made a massive cuts in the tax rate, and created a whole new scheme that really not only reduced the taxes, but increased the economy. Right? And that was the investment tax credit for businesses when they bought equipment, because American equipment was far behind what was going on in Germany and in Japan. Right? And we had to industry had to replace its equipment and its buildings. The investment tax credit came into play, a major source of revenue, tax break for companies. Another one was accelerate depreciation, which we use today. And that is, if you bought a truck, you didn't have to wait 10 years to write off the truck. You could write it off in the year you bought it. That's a major tax break for individuals and companies. So using the tax code to stimulate the economy has happened over the years. On the other side, it's used to punish. And I'm a believer in lowering taxes, right? And hopefully it'll generate more people to want to invest here. One of the things Trump did in the last, by the way, in his last time here, was he allowed U.S. companies that had their headquarters in other countries, such as Apple, which is was in Ireland, I believe, right? To repatriate their earnings, meaning they went overseas because the corporate tax rate was cheaper in Ireland than it was or lower in Ireland than it was in America, and Trump got that reduced through this, going from 35%, as you mentioned, down to 21%, but also bring those earnings back tax-free, and get these companies back in America again, and get this money back in America, and hopefully that's the other side of the tariffs. I hope they're not going to stay on as long as as short a period as it can happen. Is companies were saying, look, if you're going to have a tariff, we'll just assume build in America and put our plant in America than building overseas and then having you tax us and making our product more costly here. That's another outgrowth of this. But is it complicated? Absolutely. And but hey, when you have 3 million employees and a budget of several $1 trillion, it's complicated. And every one of these, I mean, wait until they get into the Defense Department. That's going to be.
Well, I'm assuming that's sort of close to being the sacred cow, right? I mean,
well, they have to get in there. I mean,
I mean, I would have thought that would have been a great place to start, because for years we've been hearing about cost overruns and not that we shouldn't be building fighter jets and battleships and everything else and drones. Actually, sounds like the thing we ought to be focusing on more than anything else at this point, given the nature of the warfare that's unfolding in Ukraine. But for years people were saying, how come it costs like a couple of $1 billion to build an F-35 or whatever? How can that be possible? So I don't know. I guess I would have thought that might have been a good place to start, because that's where a lot of the money is. But for a lot of people, that's apparently very difficult. There's a lot of lobby groups and interest groups that are saying, no. That's the reason why that costs so much is this. And again, you have senators and congressmen who see some federal program going away from some factory or defense plant in their state, and it's like, no way, Jose, are we going to do that?
Well, okay,
I don't know.
You make a good point, and you're right. The going into the Defense Department is, quote, the sacred cow. But ultimately they're going to have to, and they know that. But what they're doing now is picking off the low-hanging fruit. But one example of the Defense Department, this happened a few years ago. A congressman from Connecticut in the New London area wanted a submarine, because they built submarines in Groton, Connecticut. And now he was going to get the votes until he agreed to get and support a congressman from California who wanted to build a B-1 bomber. Right? And they built the B-1 bombers in California. And Lockheed was out there, I gather, at the time. All right? So if you vote for my submarine, which ironically the Navy did not want, and nor did the Air Force want that B-1 bomber, but they want to keep those jobs going in those facilities. And that's one aspect of how a lot of this works. You take care of my district, I'll take care of your district. Right? And that's what's going to have to be attacked. And a lot of these programs are going to affect all kinds of voters. Now, Johnson bringing in, I think I mentioned to you, when he brought in McNamara, or McNamara came over from the Kennedy administration, Johnson said we need to cut the military. This is before Vietnam, right? McNamara went up and down the East Coast and closed all these shipyards. And literally tens of thousands of employees were laid off immediately. Brooklyn, Boston, Philadelphia, I believe in Baltimore, and maybe one in Charleston were closed. You and I know New York, and the Brooklyn Navy Yard was
a big deal,
a huge deal. And not only did the yards close, where they made battleships and aircraft carriers and everything else, but all the subsidiary industries that were around the shipyard, not only the restaurants but the cleaners and the suppliers to the shipyard, they were impacted. So, and that happened. That was a very controversial change. It happened immediately upon him going into office. So, he, needless to say, that was disruptive. But it was across the board, and today they're closed. Now, I think some people wish we had a few more Navy yards going right now because we need more ships. But setting that aside.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. It's funny. I was thinking back to I used to live not far away from where the Brooklyn Navy Yard once was, and I remember often looking down on where it was, and it was this sort of big wasteland. But now it's one of the coolest places to live in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it is.
So
You're right.
Times change and everything like that. So it's definitely come back, although all those jobs that were there weren't. Well, I mean, again, I think there's an intelligent way of going about this, and then there's the way that Elon Musk seems to like, which is just to go, move fast and break things. So that's Mark Zuckerberg, I guess. But I guess it's whatever, it's fine to, like, if you buy a company like Twitter and rename it X and say we're going to completely, do things in a completely different way, and all you guys are fired now. That's a private business. I mean, he owns it. Fine. If that's the way you want to go about it. It didn't seem like it was a very intelligent way of going about it, but okay, you own it. It's yours. The government's a different thing. The government is public sector. Involves things like Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid and a lot of programs that are directly linked to the quality of life of people, not just the quality of life, but if they're going to be alive in the first place, because the government has so many research grants going on to hospitals and universities. It's just a different kind of situation. I don't think you have it just doesn't make as much sense to kind of go to just sort of level stuff and then decide, oh, well, we actually need this piece or we need that piece. We'll pull that back together again. I mean, the people that now used to be there and were doing that stuff, they moved on to find other jobs. And do they want to come back? I mean, I guess I'd have to wonder. I mean, to me, it's like, I read a lot of stories about people who worked at things like in the forest, in the national forests. Places like Yellowstone or some of these other national treasures going to be able to open this summer when the tourist season gets away, because all these guys have now been fired or, in some cases, invited back.
Yeah, because they made a mistake.
It's crazy. But it's like, they do that over and over, it seems like, so far. And, you would think that common sense alone would say, well, wait a minute, there's another way we can go about doing this. And yet they just seem to kind of want to just move fast and break things. And then, because politically they can say to their people, hey, look, we're doing just what we promised to do on the campaign trail. We're going to, restructure government. And then somehow or another, the following news cycle whereby, oh, that didn't work out quite so well, all these people coming back, that never seems to catch up to the original story. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I find myself just being very concerned that while there might be some logic buried deep within this somewhere, it's hard to find it. I mean, and again, the ripple effects of some of the stuff, I don't mean to keep coming back to the tariff thing, but we've managed, in the space of a couple of weeks, to trash a relationship with our next door neighbor, Canada, that was the model of good relations. I mean, we have what, 3,000 miles of virtually unprotected border? I don't think there's another two countries in the world that could say that. And, you know, a lot of commerce goes back and forth. I mean, right here in Vermont, as we both well know, you know, Canada is a big part of the Vermont economy, not just from stuff we buy and stuff we sell, but people who travel down here and come to our gift shops and stay at our hotels and motels. And, you know, all we're hearing now is that Canadians are going to go someplace else rather than the U.S. because the way that, you know, Trump talks about making Canada the 51st state and all these other things are just, it's humiliating. If they were talking about that to us, we'd be outraged.
Well, they do that to us. I mean, Canada has been assessing major tariffs on us, on our goods, particularly our lumber. Why? Because they're a lumber company. They're a lumber country. And that's, you have to get down to the specifics of who was taxing what. And that's what I mean. When the let me hold off on Canada. You go back to the EU. I mean, if the data is right, and again I haven't checked the data, but this is what I hear, that there are $350 billion of tariffs from the 26 EU countries to us. Right? In turn, what we shipped over to them, right, was something like 54 billion in tariffs. So why such a huge difference? Right? The same thing with China. There's a major manufacturing company in this area, a major one, that told me years ago, when is the government ever going to sit down in China and get China to allow its currency to float? Meaning, the country was deliberately holding down the rate of the yen, so that the yen could be goods from China could be sold so much cheaper here. Because the yen wasn't allowed to float like the dollar could float, and mostly all currencies are allowed to float market-wise. And it was forcing this company to go overseas with their manufacturing. Right? The other one is which is sort of encouraging to me, is that the U.S. steel makers and aluminum makers, together with the head of the automotive union, the National U.S. Automotive Union, support what's going on. Why? Because their jobs are directly impacted by it, by what's all the auto industry and the steel industry that was going over to Canada and to Mexico. Why? Because the government of Canada and the government of Mexico was subsidizing their industry. Again, that's in violation of the treaty. And if the country is going to be subsidizing a company's manufacturing, obviously that goods coming from that country, that company, will be cheaper, and that therein lies the imbalance, and that's why these treaties are all set to avoid that. But that wasn't the case. So now that's a major part of this tariff thing. But I think it's all going to get settled out in a couple of months. It's too broad. They're going to have to all work together and resolve it, just like we did when don't forget, we had the NAFTA treaty, and then under Trump's administration that was reworked. And interesting, he's going against some of the things he had in his own treaty.
Well, yeah.
But Andrew, all I can say is, and I'm not all I can say, but what's happening, we knew about was coming. Whether it was in trade, on the immigration issue, on the Ukrainian war, on so many of these other areas, we knew it was. Whether we agree with the way it's being carried out is an issue, right? And that's, I think, what your point's been. Right? But he's carrying it out. He's doing what he said he was going to do, or this administration is so far.
Yeah, so far. Like you say, in 3 months it could be a different picture. I mean, which then makes me wonder, okay, so this is just a big negotiating ploy, huh? Is that the idea that we're going to talk tough and somehow or another get some kind of concession?
I believe it is. I believe, and that's the way don't forget, he's a troller, he's a negotiator, and he's a transformist. Right? That's somebody mentioned that in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago, and this is the negotiation part of him. I recall, and it was being shown recently, because I think the Democrats are very upset. Some of the Democrats are very upset with Senator Schumer. right? Big time. And then they're showing on TV back when back in the Obama administration, he was in the White House, and this is in December of 2010. He said what we should. Let me have a quote here. Medicaid. Chuck Schumer mentioned that Medicaid, not Medicare, but Medicaid. Let's cut the bad stuff, but keep the good stuff. Right? And what he was referring to, obviously, was in Medicaid, as in Medicare, as in Social Security, there's fraud. Right? The independent General Accounting Office says it runs roughly $500 billion a year. Right? That's an enormous number. And I like to see that, but you hear from time to time someone whose brother had or a parent had passed away, and they're still collecting the Social Security. Right? But $500 billion, I mean, to me, that's an awful lot of fraud. And is it really that much? But in any event, that was Schumer back then. So he wasn't against waste and so forth. But now he's on the outside. I hope that doesn't last.
I mean, I'm sure no one's in favor of waste or fraud, except those who might be benefiting from it, I guess. But you know, again, there's a way to go about it. I mean, I think Al Gore in the Clinton administration led that reinvent the government effort. I actually looked it up. I was kind of interested to see kind of what that had resulted in, because I had completely forgotten about it. But they eliminated 100 programs, cut 250,000 government jobs, consolidated 800 agencies.
250,000?
250,000. But they did it in a thoughtful way. It wasn't like out of the blue you get an email saying, "Have a nice day," and you're gone. It was done in an intelligent fashion. It took place over a period of years, but and wound up saving a lot of money. Probably why the Clinton administration was in one of its last years able to submit a balanced budget, the last one ever. But you know, I don't know. It just seems like the world, global politics, international affairs are a whole different thing. The rules of New York City real estate transactions don't apply equally, I think. And some of the experiences that the president may have had back 30, 40 years ago, building casinos in Atlantic City and buildings in New York, I don't think you can take the same playbook for that and take that into international affairs or tariffs or slimming the size of the government. I find myself really worried that there's going to be long-term damage done to the U.S. Its perception as being a reliable partner, as being someone, an ally that you can trust. I mean, it has been shocking to watch the Trump administration's rhetoric towards European countries, our NATO allies, that we are treaty-bound to government help, to cast doubt upon that. I mean, you can make a good argument that the Europeans may have had an easier, softer time of things over the past 70 or 80 years, and not have to spend as much money on their own defense and their own militaries, and that maybe it's time for them to ramp up the spending a little bit, so that we don't have to come to their aid on everything. But I think, again, what they've done is basically made the country look like we're not reliable, we have some kind of an issue. And I, quite frankly, feel very sorry already for the next president who's going to come into office in 2029, assuming it's not J.D. Vance or another Republican. If it is a Democrat, they're going to have a lot of rebuilding to do. They're going to go to some of these folks who said, who were complaining about some of the current administration's policies, and they're going to say, okay, well, that's done, that's over. And they're going to say, maybe for 4 years it may be over, but what happens in 2032? And that's assuming, I mean, there's been some people saying, well, that's assuming we even have another election. I will take an optimistic approach and say, yeah, there will be, but It's like there's been long-term damage done, and it wasn't necessary. It didn't have to be that way.
I think it was necessary. I really do. I think Europe had to be called out. We were subsidizing their defense for so long. I mean, and this has been called out for a number of years, and they just wouldn't agree to it. And they were able to spend more of their economy on their social programs and on their to benefit them. Why? Because we were providing the umbrella, right? And they had agreed at one point that they would spend anywhere from 2.5% to 5% of their GP, the gross national product, on defense. That wasn't the case, so now they recognize that yes, we can't keep depending on the U.S. to bail us out, and that was what was going on here. And you know what? They are now grouping together, and they're doing that, and they know that under I think it's Article 5 of the NATO treaty, that if something happens, we'll be there. I mean, we're there for Israel right now. I mean, Israel is being attacked by the Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Hutus. Right? And the Hutus, they've taken care of, I think, for the most part, settled down the Hamas and the Hezbollah. But the Hutus are too far away from Israel for them to go after. But and what was this Iranian-backed group doing? They were attacking all the shipping in the Red Sea and basically closing down the Suez Canal, costing all these other countries fortunes in shipping. Where was the European Union in defending that?
If I remember correctly, the British and French did send missiles and ships.
You're exactly right. But there are 26 other countries, right? And where was the UN in stepping in? Why did we have to come in? Well, we were there, and we want to be there. And now we're doing something about it, because this is these desert groups cannot function without Iran. I mean, how does the Hutus in Yemen wind up with cruise missiles? It's not something that they manufacture there, right? And who's now wanting to come in with us now? Azerbaijan, I think, that country in Asia, and wanting to form an alliance, and they want to join the Abraham Accords. Right? It's a Muslim country, and they want to protect themselves and the Mideast against this threat from Iran. Right? So I mean, it's not all negative as you point out. I think foreign affairs is a very complex thing, and a lot goes on behind the scenes that we don't know. And as we speak this morning, as we're speaking here today, rather, there's a discussion going on in the White House, I believe, with a phone call with Putin. Right? Who knows what's going on behind the scenes?
And some of it we probably shouldn't know. I mean, I know we're going to have to wind this up shortly, but I'll just say that it would have been a lot better to have that conversation with Zelensky off camera.
Andrew, I couldn't agree more with you. But foreign affairs can get very ugly in the discussions, and they should be held off camera. As I mentioned to you, when Roosevelt met with de Gaulle, it got so bad that with de Gaulle wanting to know why he was not kept informed about the invasion of North Africa, and why we don't make a second front now, back in 1942. Roosevelt's head of Secret Service was standing behind the curtain in that room with his gun drawn in case de Gaulle was going to attack Roosevelt. That's in his book, Mike Riley of the White House. If I can, I like to quote, what's her name, Peggy Noonan, who mentioned, and this is a quote, the Democrats, should show that they are an alternative to Trump. Instead, they show why he won. And I can say this without any hesitation. This country needs two strong political parties, and right now the Democratic Party is in shambles nationally. And if they're going to let AOC and what's her name, Representative Crockett and the Bernie Sanders take over the party, they're going to miss the middle of America. And that's what they lost the last time. And they're losing it.
Well, that's an excellent subject for another conversation. And I'm not going to disagree with you at this point. I mean, I think I'll just briefly say that, yeah, they didn't articulate a good alternative in the 2024 election. I think there are a lot of factors that you can look at. Number one being that I think Joe Biden should have let his pride get in his way, should have stepped down 2 years before the election and said, I did my job, I'm done. But you raise an interesting question there that I don't feel like I can answer in a minute or two. I think, yes, absolutely, the Democratic Party is going to have to figure out, come much clearer, and it's really a messaging issue, I think, more than anything else, what they would do instead of what we're seeing currently. And I think there's a strong message that's there waiting to be told clearly. Right now, the party's struggling to kind of get to that point, and may well struggle for a while longer. But I think there's no doubt in my mind that there is a strong alternative that can be done. I think you can look at some of what happened in 2020 with the COVID pandemic as being an explanation for some of that. But again, I don't want to take one step into the pond here.
I think we need another
when
show.
I need to put on my scuba diving suit.
Another show, you agree?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank our audience for being with us today. I want to thank Andrew for being with me. And again, it's civil discourse. And the idea is really, not the idea, but the purpose is to allow the other person to speak. Don't speak over that other person. And try to, at times, get to their side of the argument and see what they're trying to say. Understand what they're the point they're trying to get across. And I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to another show.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Have a great
Thanks
day.
again.